We bring in now, like I said, Joel Klatt, who is up early with us on the West Coast. And I didn't know it, Joel, but evidently you are a dancing machine.
I don't know about dancing machine, but
did you watch the dancing video before it was tweeted out by Fox Sports?
No, I had no idea. And then my phone starts buzzing, and they're like, start asking me about my dancing. I'm just thankful that they didn't tweet it out until after the game, because my phone started buzzing so much. I would have thought, like,
you'd said something inappropriate during the course of the game,
or
something.
Oh my gosh, what did I say?
Was there an open mic?
Am I about to get fired?
Yeah.
So no, here's the deal. Like, we have a speaker going in the booth, and we have a good time, and like all of us are up there. Gus is up there, Scotty, our spotter, Terry Freeman, who's part of the security detail, all the guys that are up there, Jared and Derek, Jared's part of our audio crew, Derek's part of our camera crew. And it's like the same guys every week, right? And we're just hanging out, and we're there so early, and so we got the speaker going, and I'm never the one dancing. I can just tell you that. And finally, they were just like, "Hey, let's go, let's see it." And that was I guess the best I got. I don't know. It was kind of impromptu, but that's the best I got.
Well, I will say this. I do think a lot of people don't realize how much when you're on the road with a crew, everybody kind of gets to know everybody else pretty well. It's a different kind of job. Maybe, I don't know, it's kind of a high-stress job. It's also, when you're away from home, it's a little bit different of a vibe. I mean, there is a camaraderie to being part of a television crew. Would you agree maybe that people wouldn't anticipate that?
Oh, no, there's no doubt. And the majority of this crew, there's been a couple of people here and there that have been different, but the majority of our crew has been together now. This is our 6th season.
Yeah.
And so we're traveling around the country with each other, and it's not just, it's easy to just think like, oh, it's Gus, Joel, and Jenny. But there's, Clay, there's 40 people that travel every week.
It's a big undertaking that people don't realize in order to put on a game.
But between producers and directors and the tape room and all the camera crew, and those camera guys are setting up the production every week and then tearing it down afterwards. And so they know all of our particulars about how we like the booth set up. And it is a giant operation. And I'm so thankful to every one of those men and women that work their guts out and get no acclaim for it. Nobody knows their name, and they're traveling around the country just like we are. And they work really hard. So when we have a chance to have some fun, man, why not?
You guys had an interesting game, and I'm going to get into an interesting day in college football.
Wait.
Yeah.
You can't ask me to evaluate the dancing, and then you get off the hook. So,
I thought...
Now you have to analyze the dancing. Like, you got to tell, because here's the deal. I feel like from the feedback I've gotten on Twitter, it all depends on what is your bar of expectation. If you're just like, okay, here's a middle-aged, 38-year-old, former quarterback, white dude, let's say it how it is, everyone's like, yeah, that wasn't bad. But if
you were better than I thought you were going to be. Because I see you as kind of
like vinegar coming out.
It does.
Of your mouth.
I hate to say it. I hate to say it. I thought you would be a lot more stiff. Now, I couldn't hear the music in the background that well, so I don't know how well you were on beat or anything like that. But the actual body movement, I was impressed. I thought you were better at dancing than I would have anticipated. I think I broke my phone computer screen when I saw that you were going to be dancing in the press box, hoping that I'd be able to ridicule you more than I was. But I was like, this is actually not that bad. Now, I did tag you and let people give you letter grades, and there were, it's Twitter, right? There were a wide variety of different letter grades that people gave you from the dancing perspective. But I think the overall feedback was fairly positive.
And here's the thing, man. If you don't take yourself too serious, then stuff like that is fun. So I love the people that are, giving me F, and they're like, hey, how's your hamstring? Are you, all that? I love it. That's good. That's good stuff. That's when Twitter actually works, I feel like.
Yes. Well, it was like when you made fun of the humor on Twitter. A lot of the humor on Twitter is like awful, right? It's like not in any way like funny. It's like, I hope, it's not even really humor. It's like, I hope you die, it's like very negative, right? when there is a little bit of a spice in the humor, right, where it can be a little bit negative. And I'll give you an example. When you decided that I looked like I was a zombie when I was doing a live hit from Bourbon Street.
New Orleans.
Yeah, New Orleans. Years ago. This was when Ohio State and Alabama were playing. I think it was the first year of the playoff. Maybe back in like 2014-ish, if I'm not mistaken. You somehow saw Jenny Taft and Stuart Mandel, we did a live shot from right outside of the beignet place for everybody who's been down to New Orleans. And it was a great shot, and I thought I was doing an incredible job. And you just zoomed in on me and said I looked like death.
I remember the caption. It was like, Jenny looks like she had a fresh pressed juice. Yeah. Stuart Mandel looks like he had a tall glass of whole milk, and Clay looks like he had 18 hurricanes and slept in the gutter.
And so the feedback on that was unbelievable, right? Like immediately I think Jenny put the photo up and didn't even think anything of it. And then you saw it and you commented, and it just ricocheted across the internet with everybody taking shots at me for the live shot.
That's when it works. This is when social media works, folks.
That's when social media works. All right, speaking of works. All right, let's dive into some of this mess. What's not working, and I'm sure you're talking to people like I am, this contact tracing business in college football is fundamentally broken. It doesn't matter if you're in the Big Ten, the SEC, the ACC, the Big 12, the Pac-12. The system that is in place is fundamentally illogical. And for people out there who haven't realized it, most of these games are getting postponed or canceled, not because of positive tests, but because guys are being contact traced, and you're out oftentimes longer for contact tracing than you are if you actually test positive. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, here's a couple of things that are true about what's going on. Okay, the majority of games, not overwhelming, but majority of games that have been postponed or canceled have been due to contact tracing. There have been a couple that have just been like way too many positive cases. Like for instance, Arizona State's dealing with a bit of a spike right now. So, that just is what it is. So they canceled already this week for Colorado. Florida had an issue, right? So there's things like that pop up, and you understand it, and you try to get your arms around it and move forward. The other ones are all about, number of offensive linemen. That's coming up a lot because number of scholarship players, number of quarterbacks healthy on the roster or available on the roster. Okay, so there's that. Now let's get into this contact tracing thing and why it's become an issue. And I talked a little bit about it last week, maybe not with you, Clay, but later in the week I did. What's going on right now in the SEC is that you're having teams that had their first spike of positive cases and a heavy number of them in June and July. Okay, so for instance, if you're a team like LSU that had a heavy number of cases in June and July, then all of those players that tested positive, and in some cases, and I'm not saying that this is exactly LSU, but in some cases, there were teams with 60 or 70 guys that actually tested positive, some teams more in the summer, okay, in that first kind of the wave of COVID, at least through the Sun Belt in the summer.
When everybody got back on campus, and those guys all did what most college guys do. They went out to bars, they went to parties, and they tested positive very soon after they got back on campus oftentimes.
That's right. And so what happened, though, is that they fell into this 90-day
they didn't have to get tested
scenario where they didn't have to get tested and they couldn't get contact traced. Okay, so then now all of a sudden those players are coming off of that list where they're now available to be contact traced. Here's the problem with contact tracing. There's two major problems, and you touched on them a little bit. The first is that there's actually not, Clay, a broad general rule across college football or even within conferences about how each team and school is dealing with contact tracing. Did you know that?
I know that there's been disputes about the way that everybody's applying the rules, like that they're somewhat flexible in nature.
They're not actually adhering to a set of quote unquote rules. There's a lot of interpretation, and we think this is what the CDC guidelines mean, and another school thinks that it's something different, almost like the compliance offices at each school for NCAA violations. So it's very interesting. I know that. So for instance, I know that some schools, like as long as they feel like they're 6 feet apart in a position meeting room, and one player on the position group gets tested positive, they won't contact trace the rest of the position group, and they'll only contact trace roommates. Okay, right. I know programs that's their bar. I know other programs that if a kid sits in a meeting room, whether he's 6 feet apart from everybody or not, everybody in that room is going to get contact traced. And then that begins I think the biggest issue with the contact tracing, which is this. Once you've been contact traced, you are down 14 days, period. You cannot test out of it, which is absolutely bonkers when you think about that. Bonkers. Meanwhile, if you test positive, you can actually test out of that. Yeah. If you get an antigen test that is positive and then you get subsequent PCRs that are negative, then everyone's like, okay, you're fine. But if you get contact traced by someone that gets a confirmed PCR positive test and you get contact traced, you are done for 14 days, period. You can be as healthy as ever. You can test 8 times and they will not budge. And I think that that's madness. I do. Yes. I think that it's absolute madness.
I don't disagree at all. By the way, SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey went on College Game Day, said that the SEC has completed 80,000 tests and that 0.005% of those tests have been confirmed positive. And I got a quote from him. The ripple effect is contact tracing. The reality is that if all of our opt-outs were actually playing right now, we'd be playing 7 games today. He said that on Saturday during game day. If we didn't have to deal with contact tracing, which we do, it's a public health expectation and requirement we'd be playing football. It's not simply about the spread or the positive test results. It's about what's happened around the virus. Those are quotes from Greg Sankey about the challenges that are in play here. And what the big issue, obviously, is that at least in the SEC, the ACC, and the Big 12, they were able to have some flexibility so they could postpone instead of cancel. Now, in the Pac-12 and in the Big 10, you don't get postponements, you get cancellation. So where are we headed here? Do you feel good about the Pac-12 and the Big 10 being able to crown legitimate champions this year? Because I feel good about the Big 12, the SEC, and the ACC being able to do so, and I think you probably would as well.
Yeah, I think that they would get close. There's no doubt about it. I think that they just need a few more games. I think that it's problematic if they start missing more in those conferences, but we'll kind of cross that bridge when we get there. But you asked me my confidence level in the Big Ten and in the Pac-12, it's 0. Just think about it. Wisconsin has gone through their spike. They've missed 2 games. Based on the Big Ten bylaws for this season, you have to play 6 games in order to participate in the Big Ten championship game. So if they miss another game, whether it's their fault or not, then they're disqualified from the Big Ten championship game.
It's crazy.
So you mean to tell me if they go undefeated with the way that they've looked and they're 5-0, we're just going to send somebody else? Well, we're just going to send Iowa or Northwestern or somebody else to go play probably Ohio State. Meanwhile, Ohio State's lost a game. Do you mean to tell me if they lose a couple more games, now all of a sudden we're going to say, hey, Ohio State, I know you're trying to go to the playoff, but you don't meet our requisite number of games in order to go to the Big Ten championship game? So they've kind of done this to themselves, but I don't feel very confident that the Big Ten is going to have a smooth road to the end of this season and get to their championship game. I think the same could be said for the Pac-12, which is why last week, I don't know if I was the very first, but Clay, very early, before this wave started to get going, I put out there that, hey, the CFP needs to think about being flexible. Yeah. And after that, it started really gaining some momentum. And then Bob Bowlesby was asked about it, and he said, yes, those conversations have taken place. I really do believe that they need to think about how flexible they need to be, whether it's a week or 2 weeks, and not just have this strict deadline of December 20th when the CFP needs to put out their final rankings. I think it's absolutely crazy to put that hard deadline on the college football season. I don't think it gives us the true 4 best teams in the playoff potentially. I also don't believe that it gives the kids that have opted into this season, which all of these kids have, the best opportunity to play the most number of games that they possibly can. Remember, this is their job interview. A lot of these guys are trying to put together tape to go to the next level and further their career in the sport of football. And if we're just taking away games and saying like, hey, sorry, it's not going to happen because the college football playoff didn't want to move, that doesn't sound to me like it's very player friendly, which we always, at least the administrators always talk about. They're trying to do the best thing by the quote unquote student athletes. I mean, think about it. The most immovable organization in our country, in the sporting world, Augusta National Golf Club, just played the Masters in November. Yep. I think that Bill Hancock can punt 2 weeks and have the college football playoff give their rankings after Christmas.
We're talking to Joel Klatt. Do you agree that expanding the playoff is a bad move given all the different moving parts? Because we had that discussion with Greg Sankey on Thursday, and he said, look, I mean, I think trying to go to 8 this year, which is something else that people have argued because of the difficulties inherent in all these different seasons and trying to open up opportunities for all the different conferences to get in. He said, look, I mean, and I do think it's an intriguing question. What do you do if one of these teams is getting contact traced and can't play for 2 weeks, right? And if you go to 8, right, it becomes a lot more of an issue than if you're sticking at 4.
Yeah, I actually 100% agree with him. I think that they need to think about expanding to 8 in the near future for revenue reasons, and to recoup some of the losses that they're taking across the landscape in terms of revenue this season. But having said that, I think that you're trying to expand the season, I think is probably a bit foolish at this point when we're just trying as best we can to get the most number of games that we can in, right? So I fully agree with him. I think that we missed the boat already. What we should have done in order to create somewhat of an expanded playoff is get rid of divisions throughout college football like the ACC is doing this year and just say, hey, we're going to put the best 2 winning percentages in every league in a championship game. And then, Clay, what you have is basically a de facto 10-team playoff, and then you take the 4 best champions or some mixture of that. And I feel like that would pit, if you really think about it, that would pit basically 10 of the top, 18, 20 teams in the country against each other in Power 5 championship games.